Yeah, it's on the screen.
All right. So I'm just going to show you. I continue to use. I started off, even before the Tomofix was available. I used to do high tibial osteotomies almost from the time I finished my fellowship. Earlier, we used to use ring fixators, and then when the Orthofix was available, we started using the Orthofix. Then the Tomofix and other plates have come in. I use them quite a bit, but still, it's only 20% of the work. And I'll show you a couple of cases why, because I find it much easier with a fixator. So this 66-year-old lady with significant varus, arthritic changes. Somebody was asking about patellofemoral. So the X-ray shows, but she didn't have any real knee pain. All her pain was localized on the medial knee joint. And now here, if you see, if we draw her angles, you will find that there is an increased angle over here. I think in her planning, we will have it. And she has this lateral thrust. So if there is a lateral thrust and there is, if there is femoral varus, then they need to have a femoral osteotomy. So in this particular case, we will do a double osteotomy. What I use really to decide is an MRI to confirm that the lateral compartment cartilage is okay. I use a valgus stress view to see that the medial joint line opens up. Patient has to be an active person, poor candidate for a TKR in other situations in terms of, say rural background, etc., etc. Age is not necessarily a factor for my decision. So here, even though on the standing view, you can see that the joint space is grossly reduced. On a valgus stress view, you can see that the medial side opens out the moment the load goes onto the lateral side. And this is also useful to explain to patients that, how the concept of how that unloading works. Now, in her case, her LDFA was 94. So we decided that she will need a osteotomy of the femur as well as of the tibia. Now on the femur, because it's well clothed with muscle and it's a closing wedge osteotomy, doing a distal femoral closing wedge is really a piece of cake. One of the best surgeries I think ever devised, because it is so stable that patients get going right away. So there we use a plate, but for the tibia, we use, normally I use a fixator. For this lady, we use a plate because she was older. So this is a standard distal femoral closing wedge, which is also biplanar, just like described for the tibia. And once this closes, you really can't see the osteotomy, stable as hell. And once that is done, the alignment has improved. Okay, it was way onto the medial side. Now it's come closer to the center. So now we need to do the opening wedge. So here we keep this wire in. Now, as Bhushan described, I also use this hinge wire if required. But with this amount of opening out, you can see that the alignment rod is going to the base of the lateral tibial spine, which is where I want it. Basically, that gives us an angle of 185, 183 to 186, and mechanical axis deviation of somewhere between 62 to 67. In this particular case, because I'd done a femoral osteotomy, also, I put in that graft into that gap, and that's her post-op X-ray. But when I do the full-length X-ray, surprise, surprise, this comes more than what I had seen on table. And I do everything that has been talked in the technique, axial pressure to stimulate weight bearing, etc., and ensure that I use the alignment rod, etc. However, this was the amount of mechanical axis deviation that I got. And also, if you notice here, this is more than 186 degrees, the HKA. Patient is doing perfectly fine. but this is a worry that I am not able to correct it as accurately as I would like. So that's her clinical pictures. Now with that, she's walking well. We've not done anything to the soft tissue. You can see her lateral thrust has gone away. And that's an important point, that for the so-called soft tissue laxity, as long as you get the loading onto the lateral side, they don't have any lateral laxity anymore. A similar case, older lady, I think she was 65. You can see her mechanical axis deviation, valgus stress, full length X-rays. We use the same way as Clement talked about to calculate the angle of correction. Sorry. And do this intra-op alignment with the thing spread open. One thing for everybody, I think, is that the cautery cord is not good enough. It kind of twists and moves quite a lot. So really what you should be using is the alignment rod in the set. So we first center it on the head, we center it on the ankle, and then bring the C-arm to the knee to look at it, right? So we do all of these things. We use the alignment rod, we use axial pressure, and aim somewhere for the base of the tibial spine. Now with this open as much, we put the plate in, right? So we did an HTO, open wedge, tomofix, and biplanar as described without any graft interposition. However, again, when we do the full length X-ray, we find that this is a little more onto the lateral side. And as Bhushan pointed out, patients don't like excessive valgus. So to me, it's important to be to, between 183 to 185, because that is what really unloads the medial joint well. But I don't like this going excessively lateral, And this is probably the area which is kind of the unknown factor. You can never predict or precisely plan for this soft tissue. Some of them open up a lot, some of them don't open up much. Now you see on table, she's opening out this much, but on the full length X-ray, you see here, she's not opening out that much. So what is that number that you need to take? Right? So there is a number which they talk about, I think. One second. So we use the angle of correction minus the soft tissue, that is the joint line convergence angle, this one, plus 3, which would be the normal joint line convergence angle. So if you see over here, the angle of correction was 15, and we subtracted 2.7 from it to get an angle of correction of 13. So we use that same method even for our Ilizarov corrections, but somehow it's not that precise. Now what I do is with the fixator, I put on the fixator, I do my osteotomy distal to the tuberosity, but it is an oblique osteotomy similar to what the AO talks about. The tibial tuberosity will be somewhere over here. So I'm going distal, but my apex is at the same point that all of us talk about, somewhere around the tip of the fibula. Now, one advantage of this is this does not affect the patellar height. This does not increase the patellofemoral pressure, even in some of our patients who have significant metaphyseal varus, where you need to do large corrections. Because you are distal to the tuberosity, you are not affecting the patellofemoral contact stress. So it is distal to the tuberosity, but it's not complete, and it is aiming right for the tip of the fibula with an intact lateral hinge. So this is a comparison of the blue, which is what most people talk about for a biplanar osteotomy, and the AO guys talk about it. And this is what I do, which is slightly distal, so that the tuberosity goes into the proximal fragment, but the obliquity is the same, and the ending of it on the tip of the fibula is the same. So once I've completed my osteotomy, it is a complete osteotomy in the sense that it allows for opening out, but it is incomplete in the sense that the lateral hinge is intact. So I can use a frame, fixator, which is very relatively low profile, because there is an inherent stability in the system, right? And we close it down, and then after 7 days, we start this distraction. Now, the important thing here is, for all patients, we calculate what is the angle of correction, just like we calculate for the Tomofix. Why do we do that? Because we want patients to come back after X number of days so that we can do a full length X-ray. I don't want to do full length X-rays repeatedly. I want to do it on a, one particular day so that I know that, okay, now this angle has come to absolutely correct, right? So this plan, our Elisara plan, the fixator planning also takes the abnormal JLCA into account. And here, from this apex, we've calculated 13.1, and on the fixator, how much distraction will happen using the magnification that Clement talked about. So our numbers are real world. They are not going to go wrong by magnification, etc. So 21 days of distraction is what we calculate for this particular patient. And I would say about 8 times out of 10, we are perfect. But 2 times out of 10, we still have issues. So for this patient, we calculated 21 days. She came after 21 days of distraction, and her mechanical axis was way onto the lateral side. So mechanical axis deviation was much more than what we wanted. So because we have a fixator, we can calculate, okay, so many days of distraction resulted in so many, so much overcorrection. So how much should we reduce it by? So here we have the desired MAD and the desired HK. This is a simple Excel sheet, and we can subtract 5 days of distraction. That means turn the fixator in a reverse direction, not for 5 days. This is done on the same day, because distraction has to be gradual. Compression can be acute. So that means 5 days, meaning 5 millimeters of compression. So that's her at 2 millimeters of compression. That's her at 4 millimeters of compression, right? And she goes to 185.5 based on that. So that's the preoperative. Post correction, after we have planned properly, then 2 days, 2 millimeters of compression, and then final another 2 millimeters of compression. So now I've got the mechanical axis exactly where I want it, and the fixator is locked at 185, and the net distraction so that she had was 17 days. So even with all the calculation, in a weight bearing situation, these things tend to change. So for me, that's why I use, in 80% of the cases, I use a fixator, because it allows me infinite correction. If I find that, okay, it's not good enough, patient can go on distracting for 2 days, 4 days more. And this is in a weight bearing position, which never happens when you're doing a regular open wedge osteotomy with a plate. So I do use the Tomofix. I use it in older patients like the first one I showed you, because even if things go wrong, or they don't, the longevity of the relief is not there, they are in that age group where a knee replacement can be done. I cannot afford, according to me, that imprecision in a 40-year-old. In a 40-year-old, I want it absolutely perfect. In a 60-year-old, it doesn't matter. 5 years, 6 years later, they start getting pain, they can go for a knee replacement. Patients who need a slope correction as well as angular correction, I can't use the fixator, because it does not allow a change in the slope. So there I will have to use a Tomofix. And finally, in younger patients where I'm operating for a deformity and not for MCOA, so there a little bit of under correction is tolerable, because they are not patients for HTO or for medial compartment osteoarthritis. So that's the reasons why I use the fixator in preference to the plates in most of these cases for MCOA.
Thank you, Mangal. As usual, your talk is so lucid. No, I think we have understood every bit of it. And Mangal, you're the PowerPoint, the background, whatever we are seeing this for last 25 years, it has not been changed. That's great for you. Once this background, that white background with the yellow mark comes horizontally, we know that Mangal is presenting.
No reason to make fancy backgrounds. I mean, just, as long as your content is okay, I think the backgrounds just distract.
Yeah, just for the sake of comment. Okay. John, anything to add on?
No, I think I think it's a very justifiable plan because it gives you the ability to correct post-operatively, which no other method, the Tomofix doesn't. So I think when you're doing the Tomofix, you have to be very careful that you don't overcorrect. And yes, there will be cases occasionally where you don't get exactly the correction you want. Fixator gives you the opportunity to readjust your correction post-operatively if you think it, if in your long leg x-rays you find there's a problem. Yeah. So that's an advantage.
Let me put a question to John, you, Bhushan, Arvind, anyone else who's doing osteotomies. When you all do full length x-rays after
every time
correction,
every time.
So how many times do you find that you have not achieved what you planned for?
It's interesting that we've not seen this huge lateral problem that you showed with your x-rays. We have had some cases which are not corrected as much as we wanted to. Yes, but we've not seen this huge lateral. Maybe because I don't aim for Fujisawa's point. I just get it just across the midline. So where you're almost parallel to in line with the.
No, I understand. What I'm trying to ask is you aimed for across the midline. And just then you in the full length x-ray, you found that it is on the base of the lateral tibial spine. Or do you always, meaning explain to me why I have this trouble.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
Am I a bad surgeon?
No. It's the thing is, I never seem to go that far laterally. So my problems have been more of undercorrection. Yes.
I think Mangal, the main problem in the overcorrection is the soft. Once we don't decide the soft tissue component and we ignore the JCLA. These are the two main problems for the overcorrection. One is the soft tissue component, second is the JCLA. If you don't subtract your JCLA, you don't take the varus and valgus, you don't take the 76.4, that calculation for the JCLA, probably you will, every time you do that, you will find that overcorrection in your full length X-ray.
So we have.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, maybe 1 out of 3 cases we may go for undercorrection. Of late, I had 2 instances of slight overcorrection, but they are all extensive lesions. What I want to ask you, sir, Dr. Parihar, is there any tip you can give us how you position the knee for when you do the long rod test? Yeah, how you get the proper images intraoperatively, whether the positioning of the leg during our surgery rotations can give a false interpretation of our alignment. And then when you do the rod placement, do you also close the lateral joint so that you will be able to compensate for the JLCA? Do you apply a virus?
So this is what Staubli and Lobenhofer, both of them, talk about, is giving axial pressure on the heel with your tummy. So when you're giving axial pressure, essentially you are loading that limb and you are giving the appropriate amount of valgus stress. So I do that in all of them. As far as rotation goes, I ensure that the patella is central. I also use Staubli's sort of trick of cheap navigation where first I put in a K wire at the beginning of the surgery, keep the patella central, and put in a K wire so that it's absolutely vertical when you're looking at it from the end of the limb. Then, if you keep that patella straight, you don't have to keep shooting again and again to ensure that your rotation is correct. Just visually looking at that wire will tell you that, yes, I am central. So I will do the X-rays, that is the planning with patella forward, and I will do the surgery in patella forward, and I will do the check of the alignment also in the patella forward. Now, yes, can I be wrong by 1 or 2 degrees of rotation? Possibly. But I take every care to ensure that I am as straight as possible.
So, Mangal, what I mean, I know, I mean, I agree that your intraoperative assessment cannot be 100% perfect. So there will be some variations. What I find is that that extreme lateral thing we've not actually seen in all these cases that we've done. Okay, so we have, whenever we draw the joint line, it's been okay, or if anything, a little medial to what we would have really tried to achieve. So we've not.
No, but it's the same thing, because if it could be that if I say that I want to make a mistake, I will make a mistake slightly onto over correction side, and you may say that, okay, I may make a mistake slightly on the under correction side. Maybe that is the reason. But
it's possible.
The point is that, you know, as Clement said, in 1 out of 3, you don't meet the goal. That means 25% of patients, if you believe the theory that accurate correction leads to the longest result, then 25% of patients on table, you're saying that, okay, these guys are not necessarily going to last that long.
No, I mean, so
that is my issue.
So we correct what we calculate preoperatively on standing films. Okay, so we try to get that angle in our correction, and with this device, you're able to actually measure what correction you're doing.
Yeah, I do that. That's what. No, so I calculate my
I know. So
my angle, all of it.
So I don't
know. I'm still kind of looking for answers. If someone else has, Bhushan.
No.
I think Mangal, whatever you are calculating as, because your device is absolutely flexible, and you can basically, even if you overcorrect, still you can manage with the sort of compression on that. So that's the beauty of your your external fixator sort of thing. Because once we are wrong on table, we cannot do anything other with the Tomofix.
No, he's trying to find out why he's going wrong.
Yeah.
Why if I can get that accuracy with the Tomofix, I'll shift to the Tomofix tomorrow, or whatever other system. I mean, it's not related to this. I'm saying I will shift to acute correction tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is there any chance of intra-observer variations when you're assessing, doing pre-op planning? And have you noticed using more than one technique for pre-op planning? For example, you do the sketching, then you do software, because we use 2-3 techniques. I'm actually thankful, Dr. Mangal, you have trained Dr. VSU Kumar very well, one of my colleagues. Even if I'm doing surgery, I'll forward the x-rays to him. The morning, he will send me the number of value. Sir, you have to correct 8 degree, 8 mm correction. My fellow also will work, and then I also work using a different software. Is there any way that if you happen to use a particular method on only one instance that you can get it wrong? Or should you use more than one technique, or should you use more than one observer for planning, pre-op planning?
No, actually, same thing happens with us also. In the sense, I do the planning. My associate, Dr. Ahuja, Divya Ahuja, he does the planning, and the fellows do the planning. We do it either with there's a software which we are kind of helping to develop called TabPlan, or with there's another, I forget the name of it right now. It's a software, or we do it on the iPad. So the numbers have to match. They may be 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, or 1 degree, 2 degrees here and there, but they can't be grossly off. And that's exactly what I'm saying, that 1 degree is the error of measurement. I put the point slightly this side, that side, that 1 degree will be there. So I'm not complaining about 1 or 2 degrees. My issue is, despite being careful, I'm having it go otherwise. And the other thing which I pointed out, that even with the fixator, we plan the same way, and we plan for the patient, okay, you come back after 18 days of distraction. 8 times out of 10, when the patient comes after 18 days or whatever it is for that particular deformity, when the patient comes back, they have a perfect angle. But 2 times out of 10, they are, even with the fixator, they are not right. So it's not that the fixator is better in correction. It is the issue is basically in the planning.
Is there a is there a
So-
role? Sorry.
Go on.
So is there a role for MCL release? Suppose if I've been very liberal with my MCL release, I also released a bit of deep MCL. Will that laxity contribute to the exaggerated valgus? Theoretically, I'm asking, sir.
I probably not. I mean, I also release it, but I have it okay in some, not. It's part. I think it's part of the procedure.
So
When you use the Tomofix, you should release the MCL.
yeah, but there's a extent to which you release it. Okay, so what we do is we release it, but we don't divide it. Okay, so there is, in fact, there's some people who actually divide the superficial medial collateral ligament as part of the procedure. We don't go all the way around to the back as Bhushan showed, that we don't put our spike all the way laterally. What we make sure is we get enough space at the back on the medial side. So we just start our cut with the saw, and the rest of the cut we actually do with the osteotomes. Okay, so it's 1 by 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we put one osteotome after the one chisel after the other, and usually 4. They have now 5 in the set. We usually use 4. Then we kind of, by then it's loosened up, and then we put this device and really go very slowly in opening that up. Okay, in spite of all that, we've had 1 or 2 cracks going into the joint sometimes. That's something you have to be careful of. And obviously the lateral side, you have to be really careful. We've not had any occasion where we've had to augment the fixation on the lateral side through all these cases, probably because we are really cautious about doing it. But I'm sure that can happen. It'll happen to me next time probably.
No, the other thing, John, is whenever you change the slope, you have to break the hinge.
Yeah. If you're
your
changing
hinge
the
is broken.
slope, if you're deliberately
changing the slope, your hinge is broken. And with the Tomofix, so I've done that at least I think 6 times in terms of changing the slope, and couple of times where I've broken the lateral hinge inadvertently. But with the Tomofix, you use that yellow screw.
first screw, you have to pull it up, and you get
can
that.
use it,
Yeah. So
compress it.
So as long as you,
that thing
so
works.
as long as you just, if you are just cracking it and not displacing it, you're okay.
As long as it's not intra-articular, you're good.
Yeah, both of them. I mean, so if I find I'm getting a line going into the joint, I sometimes put a prophylactic screw across that while I'm doing it. Okay.
Breakage of lateral hinge is not very uncommon complication. Sometimes it occurs. So how often do you recommend of using a K-wire or a lateral prophylactic hinge screw for just preventing that breakage of the lateral hinge? John sir or Mangal sir?
So I haven't used it so far, so I can't. So I mean, I saw Bhushan's thing of putting a wire there. It's something maybe we'll try, but we've not had to use it so far.
There are papers which say they are very good in prevention.
Yeah.
But as I said, I have not used them regularly. Now that this is coming out, I'm looking at it. But overall, what happens is, with a certain amount of experience and you're going slowly, you know exactly where to stop. You don't make the mistake of going too much. So I would say for someone who's starting off, not a bad idea to put it in kya lagta hai.
I know it's a minor thing
over there.
So it may be worth doing.
It doesn't cost anything.
I think second important thing for beginners are for posterior cortex osteotomy, what precaution you take, and do you routinely use a lateral view for posterior cortical osteotomy, corticotomy, osteotomy of the posterior cortex?
Myself?
No. So the main thing is to make sure that you release the medial collateral of the bone and get your spike underneath when you cut, so that you have a distance between the soft tissue and the bone. Okay. And if you do that, it's like one of those things where you don't want to say that you haven't had the problem, but we've not had the problem so far. Okay, so we go there and then we go with the chisels all the way. So make sure you cut across the medial cortex. That medial cortex is really thick. Okay, the
Posteromedial, yeah.
Yeah, posteromedial cortex. So you have to make sure you've cut that with the saw. Okay, and then you
So
can.
for the Tomofix, you have to use the saw.
Yeah,
you have to use
start
the
with,
saw.
yeah.
I do it with an osteotome because I'm doing it through a 10 millimeter incision, but I can feel actually. I go
Yeah,
into
you can do it. Yeah, but.
And you can actually come out and feel, okay, now I'm on the edge, and then go.
Yeah.
So I probably go earlier. I used to show people the lateral view of the C-arm, where I would place the osteotome and then switch the C-arm into lateral and show that the osteotome is only about 2-3 millimeters beyond. I would always raise the periosteum below and move that in a side swipe manner, so that whatever soft tissue is there has fallen behind. But for the Tomofix, I think what Bhushan talked about, putting a good retractor and ensuring, because you are using a saw there.
Yes.
And some of these original guys, they use something known as a precision saw, where only the tip of the saw moves. The saw we are using is oscillating. That saw touches anywhere, it jumps. So you have to be sure that you're well protected.
Yeah, but I don't cut all the way with the saw as Bhushan does. I just cut the medial cortex, posteromedial cortex with the saw. The rest I do with the osteotome. So I don't release all the way across the popliteus to the lateral side.
Yes, but this is John Mukhopadhyay.
Yeah.
No, he can do it. No, I'm telling you. No, it is true. It's true.
No,
See, because the original technique talks about using the saw. If you use an osteotome on the posterior cortex, there is a higher risk of shattering and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Right. So he is a person who can feel. I mean, once you are doing something multiple times, you can feel how your osteotome is going. He can feel it. The guy who's starting off may not be able to judge it that well.
No,
I'm
not trying to say no. I'm not saying. So I think Bhushan, certainly, if I was going to cut all the way with a saw, I would release it all the way and put a spike all the way across. Since I'm not cutting all the way with the saw, I don't do it.
Also, Rajiv sir, you can get confirmed by your naked eye when you are doing Tomofix and cutting with the saw. After releasing the periosteum and MCL, you can literally see whether your
exactly.
correct or it has cut. So no need to check with lateral X-ray. Just you see there.
Yeah, you have to make sure that it's cut, and only then will your chisel actually cut through that part. Otherwise, it's just going to struggle. Okay.
And
Mangal sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I usually use Bone Ninja app in iPads because it automatically calculates all these angles, MIDA, LDFA and all. So pre-op and post of both. What is your take on that, sir, on Bone Ninja?
So I'm sure
Bone Ninja is good enough, but it's good enough for sort of what we call back of the paper calculation. Precision wise, it's a little less because you're working at a lesser magnification. So when we are using TraumaCAD, for example, I'm using it on a big computer screen. I can zoom into that area much easily. So in the absence of anything else, Bone Ninja is good, but you have to be sure that you are precise in terms of the calculation. I think it's a good thing to use.
Okay, I think.
Any question on YouTube?
Yes, I have a question from YouTube.
Go
Krishna Chaitanya is asking, sir, when do you choose biplanar osteotomy in tibia side?
Always.
Yeah. Okay.
Always, because the funda is that the vertical limb imparts a rotational stability. Also, that's an area which is in contact. Even if you distract, the vertical limb is in contact, so it heals quicker. So if at all, the only issue would be when you're doing large corrections where they say that instead of moving the limb up, you can move the limb downwards. But
So-
otherwise, I would say almost always biplanar. Very small patient, Haddi is very thin. Technically, it's difficult to do. Maybe I wouldn't. But otherwise, I will always do a biplanar. I think everybody agrees with that, right?
Yeah, and the idea is that your vertical limb is a complete osteotomy, while your oblique one, which goes across to the lateral cortex,
This is the partial.
is an incomplete osteotomy. Okay.
Yeah. So I think Samsul, if there is no question, we can move
We can-
forward.
Mangal sir,
Please.
Mangal sir, one thing about overcorrection and undercorrection. Will the difference between supine X-ray and standing X-ray calculation of angle of correction, a large difference will give a indication that there might be a chance of overcorrection or undercorrection more?
I have not looked at it that way, but one of the issues is that in a supine X-ray, it's difficult to get a full length X-ray.
A stitch X-ray.
So, yeah, just so you will be looking only at a spot film. Then if you look at a spot film, you are missing other things like say a little bit of femoral bowing, maybe, you know, a little bit of proximal hip varus. Those things then don't come into the picture. But
maybe
overall, yes, there is a difference.
maybe navigation.
John, what?
I'm just saying maybe navigation may be an answer in the future if you can actually
Yes.
navigate and look at your
No,
line.
I
even
have,
that
I have
might
looked
show-
at the literature on that. Even
Yeah.
that is not.
No,
as,
so
as
far it's
precise
not yet.
because-
It's not yet that accurate. But I'm saying in the future,
Yeah.
maybe we can get a.
Yeah.
Now, if our standing angle of correction is very much, there is a large difference between a standing X-ray, we are calculating angle of correction, and the supine X-ray, then there might be a chance that the ligament is so much lax that we might go into overcorrection or undercorrection.
नहीं, but
Like,
ligament lax है कि नहीं? I do my valgus stress view and my varus stress view, and I know even otherwise. That is a supine X-ray. So I'm getting that number, and I'm using that number. मतलब joint line convergence angle है 7 degrees. That means there is 7 degrees soft tissue component. Normal joint line angle is 2 degrees or 3 degrees. So if the angle of correction I get is 20, let us say, I don't correct for 20 degrees varus. I correct for 20 minus 7, 13 plus 3, 16. So my calculation of all the wedge, etc., all of us do it the same way, is based on that. You get the point. So we are already factoring in the soft tissue component.
Yeah, and anyway, you correct based on your long limb standing X-rays. So you should not get, if you're doing it on that and you do that, you should not ideally get a huge overcorrection, but there must be, obviously what we measure intraoperatively is not.
Anyway, these meetings will continue. We'll keep
Stimulate
meeting and
us
we
to
will
keep talking
discussing
about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think now